Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining us today. My name is Marianne Gagnon, and I'm the Program and Events Director at Save Your Skin Foundation. I welcome you to today's webinar presentation titled Diagnosed with Skin Cancer, Here's What to Do Next. In this webinar, Kathy Barnard, founder of Save Your Skin Foundation and melanoma survivor, will share her experience navigating and advocating through a healthcare system that is complicated and can be confusing to many. She will help patients and caregivers understand how to get from diagnosis to surgical and/or systemic treatment of melanoma or non-melanoma skin cancer. I will hand the introduction to Natalie in a moment, but first, a few logistics. All participants in the audience for today's webinar will be in listen-only mode for the duration of the session. If we have time, we will answer your questions at the end of the presentation. You will see at the red hat side of your screen an option to type in a question under the heading Question. Please feel free to ask your questions throughout the presentation, and we will do our best to answer them in the last segment. If there are any questions that do not get answered during the webinar, we will do our best to answer them afterwards in any conversation that you would like to have. This session will be recorded and will be available for viewing in English on the Save Your Skin Foundation website and on our YouTube channel. We will now begin the presentation. To introduce Kathy Barnard, I'd like to welcome our facilitator for tonight, Natalie Richardson, a melanoma survivor and operations manager at Save Your Skin Foundation. Over to you, Nat.
Thanks, Marianne. Thank you. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Natalie Richardson, as Marianne said. I was diagnosed with stage 3B melanoma in April 2014. The fact that that's almost 8 years ago, I can hardly believe. My twin daughters were 11 at the time, and we were all thrown into a brutal tailspin. I lived in Ontario at the time and had surgery and treatments at Sunnybrook in Toronto. At the time I was diagnosed, there was no approved treatment for stage 3 melanoma other than interferon, but I was lucky enough to receive immunotherapy on a clinical trial. Kathy will talk more about all that good stuff in a few minutes. Long story short, I was incredibly lucky to get that treatment, and I'm very happy that it is now available to most patients across Canada. While I was going through my treatments, and coincidentally treatments for a thyroid cancer diagnosis at the same time, I started a blog to keep my family and friends updated on how things were going. It also became a therapeutic outlet for me and in many ways led me to where I am today. Through blogging, I found Kathy, a longtime melanoma survivor and the founder of Save Your Skin Foundation, and she helped me get out of the very dark place I was in at the time. As time went on and my treatments all worked, I am now considered NED, which means no evidence of disease. I started to feel better. I wanted to go back to work and to do something meaningful with my career. So I badgered Kathy into hiring me, and she did. For the past 5 years, I've been fortunate enough to work with Kathy and Save Your Skin, trying to help patients the way Kathy helped me when I needed it most. That leads us to this webinar, where we want to share with every newly diagnosed patient or patients at any stage of their cancer experience the things that we've learned over the years, the confusing stuff that can happen, the anxiety that appointments bring or can bring, and the many questions that can arise. The objectives of this webinar are to help a newly diagnosed melanoma or non-melanoma skin cancer patient in Canada understand their disease care pathway at every stage. And I mean stage in the disease, but also stage in the care pathway, which again, Kath will talk more about. It's confusing already. To help us, the other objective is to help skin cancer patient with recurring disease. Recurring means if it comes back, understand how their options, what their options are and how it may be different if they have to go through the system again. In this webinar, we'll help you understand how we get from diagnosis to surgical and/or systemic treatment of melanoma or non-melanoma skin cancer, such as metastatic basal cell carcinoma, squamous cell carcinoma, or merkel cell carcinoma, in addition to melanoma in the cutaneous setting. One thing we know is if it's not already awful enough to be told you have cancer and you think you're going to be looked after, then you find out you quite often have to navigate the whole thing yourself. With that, I would like to introduce my best friend, my mentor, my boss, the very helpful and always loving Kathy Barnard. Thank you, Kathy, for sharing all of your experience and insight with patients across the country and the world, and for helping us to make our way through the path of a melanoma or non-melanoma skin cancer diagnosis. We have lots of questions ready, so we hope you're ready. First, though, I know you have some slides prepared for us, so I'll turn it over to you. Over to you, Kathy.
Thanks, Nat. Can I get the next slide, please? Hi, everybody. I think I'm not sure who's on the webinar, but I'm sure most of you probably know me and a little bit about my journey. But for those who don't, I kind of want to put a little history into melanoma, my journey with melanoma, and then talk a little bit about where we are today, because it's a totally different place than back in 2003. In 2002, I had found a mole on my elbow and one on my back. And as I'm very British and fair-skinned and a huge sun worshiper, I went to have them checked, only to be told that they were nothing, fatty tissue. I was 47 at the time, and that not to worry, you know, off I would go home and I would be fine. About 6 months later, the little lump that was on, and it wasn't a mole, on my left arm had grown significantly. It was about the size of a pencil eraser and had changed color. And I thought, okay, this really doesn't look good. So I went back, I had it taken out, and I was told that it was fine. There was nothing to worry about, but there was a secondary one there, and they thought they'd like to go a little deeper and get the second out. So off we went. I had 2 surgeries on the same left arm. They brought actually a plastic surgeon in because I actually play a lot of sports and I wanted to keep as much mobility in that arm as I could. So they took the second lump out, and then within a week, my GP called me, the same one that had told me not to worry, it was fatty tissue, and told me to come into the office. She wanted to give me the results of the 2 little surgeries, and I went in, and I will really never forget that day. It was Mother's Day of 2003, and she said the words metastatic malignant melanoma all in one sweep, and you can tell even in 2022, I find it difficult to say those 3 words. Her words to me were, don't go home and get on the internet. You'll be hearing from the Lionsgate Hospital in North Vancouver shortly. If you have any questions, tell your family to call me and I'll see what I can do. Well, of course, as you can all imagine, I went home to tell my husband and children, and the first thing we did was all get on a computer and Googled metastatic malignant melanoma, only to be taken to a very, very dark place. In 2003, there was very little information. The information that was there was extremely outdated. It was back from the 60s and 70s. So we already knew we were in trouble just by the diagnosis of melanoma. The very next day, I was rushed into the Lionsgate for a chest x-ray. I had my first visit with my oncologist, my new oncologist, and was told there was absolutely no treatment for me in 2003, except a drug that was used in HIV called interferon. I would need to get 5 weeks of radiation, 5 weeks of high dose interferon, and then I would start injecting myself for the remainder of the year. And I have to tell you, when you look at my waterfall plot, some of those are long, some are shorter. There's a reason for that. The side effects I had personally to interferon were pretty harsh. I barely got out of bed in that 365 days, but I was a trooper. I managed to get the full 365 days of treatment in. Within 7 days, I went right back to work. I thought I was done with cancer. I thought, you know, if I could get 365 doses in, I must be done. I went back to work. And in the January of 2005, I had to go in to get my annual chest x-ray, and it came back clear. There was nothing there. But by March of 2005, I was starting to wisp as I was speaking, and I thought, this isn't good. We went in and did another an x-ray, only to find a 14-centimeter mass in my left lung. I went right back down to my oncologist. He said, we have a problem. There still isn't a drug for you. You can't go back and re-challenge interferon, and I wouldn't have anyways. He said, we have a chemotherapy. We will give you 3 doses and we'll know whether it's working or not. I had my 3 doses. Actually, I had 2 doses and it wasn't working. My family and I gathered together because we had been told at that point I had 6 months. We all headed back on a family trip to Britain, thinking it would be my last. And the day that I came back for my 3rd treatment, when my oncologist came in, my older son said to him, I phoned a doctor in the US. They have a drug called IL-2, excuse me, and would my mom be eligible for that? So I left my doctor's office. I didn't get my 3rd round of dacarbazine. He said, I will be in touch. And the very next day, I got a call from the Cross Cancer in Edmonton, Alberta, that they wanted to see me in 2 days to walk through the IL-2 protocol. But I had to have a ton of tests done in BC before I went back. I had to do a test to check my lung. They wanted a CT scan and some other information and results from me. I went back, I'll never forget it. My husband and I flew into Edmonton, Alberta. We met with Dr. Michael Smiley and his compassionate trial team. They went through the pros and cons. At that point, I was told there was a possibility I would have to pay for it, which was $40,000. The side effects to the IL-2 were pretty intense, but that's kind of all I had. It was that or nothing. If I wanted to go and get the trial in the US, I'd have to go to Maryland. It would be paid for, as would my travel. But when I looked at the side effect management profile, I thought, boy, if I'm going to have some intense side effects and maybe loss of life, I need to be closer to my family and my home. So my husband and I said yes. We came back to BC. Again, I started running through, we did a CT scan, some PET scans. My doctor in Edmonton was away the week that I was getting all my scans, so I had to collect the digital copies to take with me. My sister and I flew into the Cross at 6 o'clock in the morning, heading over for my first treatment, and we pulled out my scans only to see that it was not just in my lung, it was in my liver, my bone, my adrenal gland, and my kidney. And I knew that part of the protocol for that compassionate trial was that it could only be in one vital organ. So her and I were very quickly making sure my life insurance policies were up to date and paid for, because we were expecting that by the time I got to the Cross, they were going to turn us around and send me home. Fortunately for me, I got to the Cross by 7:30 a.m. I was hooked up, and I thought, well, once I'm hooked up, I'm sure I don't have to leave. They won't make me leave. And sure enough, up they came, and I went through the doses of IL-2. The side effects, again, were harsh. I had a week of high-intensity drug. I went home for a week break. I came back for another week. Then I got 2 months off, and then this same regimen happened again. In the first week, I managed to get 14 doses in, which was extremely high. I was the 5th Canadian to get the IL-2 on the compassionate use. The other Canadians had stopped because the side effects were so intense. But after that first week of dosing, they took a quick x-ray and noticed that my lung tumor had shrunk in half, which to them was quite miraculous. Of course, they all phoned the doctor in the US and said, I think, we think we're doing well. I asked if they were going to do any more CAT scans because I wanted to know what was happening with the rest of the tumors. But Dr. Smiley was pretty confident that it was working in one. Hopefully it was working in all. So I completed all those rounds of IL-2. It was pretty intense, I have to tell you. And when I was done, Dr. Smiley said, I could really use your help. I know newer and innovative medicines are coming into the melanoma space, hopefully in the near future. And, you survived this. You were given 6 months in 2005. We've already got a year in. And I could really use you as a patient advocate. And I said, whatever you need, I will do. Whatever Edmonton, Alberta needs, I will do. So I started the Save Your Skin Foundation, and it was really to help patients that needed to navigate into these 2 treatments, so the IL-2 specifically, and most of it was only in Alberta, in Toronto, or sometimes we were helping get patients down into the US to newer clinical trials down there. So unfortunately for me, my melanoma came back into my small bowel. I went in and it was surgically removed. My doctor in BC said, we could go back and re-challenge the IL-2. I said, I honestly don't think I could do that. The side effects literally were code bluing a couple times, and I didn't really think my body could go through it. So I went back for a consult with Dr. Smiley, and he said, we have one of the newer innovative medicines coming. You qualify. We would like to get you on Yervoy. It would be 4 doses every 21 days. It's a 90-minute infusion. And he said, then we'll see how the tumors are doing. and there's a possibility of a maintenance on this trial. So I flew into Alberta in the morning. I would get my 90-minute infusion. I would jog over to catch the shuttle bus back to the airport, and I was back in BC that evening. I was very lucky. I had 4 doses. I had no side effects, or no side effects to me. I always say maybe I did and I just didn't notice, because the side effects of the IL-2 and the interferon were so harsh that I was comparing side effects to Yervoy to that. But what happened is, being one of the very first on the Yervoy compassionate trial, I was scanned at 12 weeks. They noticed that my tumor in my kidney that had been there since 2003 was growing a tiny little bit. So they removed the surgery, and unfortunately, I fell out of the remainder of the maintenance part of the trial. But I am happy to say, since 2009, I have had no evidence of disease. I don't call myself a survivor. I don't really call myself cured. I never want to jinx myself. I work a lot with Save Your Skin with doctors in the US. They would absolutely call me cured. They actually tell me I'm probably one of the longest long-term survivors of metastatic stage 4 disease. So I'm incredibly lucky to be here, incredibly lucky. And I always think this is my time to give back for the luck I have had. So can you go to the next slide, Nat? So if you can try to remember those dates, because they're really going to be important in a minute. So as you can see, physically and mentally for my family and I, from 2003 to 2009 was not easy. It was a very challenging time. And all of you that have been diagnosed with any type of cancer know that your life has changed and your life is different forever. And never mind the physical part, but the mental part is equally as hard on us. But there was one more patient, actually, a young mom that was also diagnosed. She was diagnosed in 2006, right when the compassionate trial of the Yervoy came on, and her name is Mel. And I kind of have the one part of her story here, because I think it really equates to the difference even that was happening in 2006 in the metastatic melanoma place. So Mel was diagnosed. She went to surgery. After surgery, she went right to the Yervoy. She had her 4 rounds of the Yervoy and then went on the maintenance. So she was complete by 2007. And Mel is now a grandmother. She's had no reoccurrence of disease ever since. And I'm happy to say she also is a huge friend and of mine and the foundation. So this, again, just keep noting the slide is from 2003 to 2009. When I present to doctors, I like to say, boy, look at my flat line, but apparently that's not a term they think is as funny as I do. But again, since 2009, I have been no evidence of the disease. So can we go to the next slide now, please? So no, I'm not a bus driver. But what I will tell you is, when I was presenting in those early days of 2003, 2006, I was talking about how melanoma is a very tough cancer to have and get, not only because it's, you know, still equated to skin cancer, which people still think you just go in and have it surgically removed and you're good to go. I was always educating people that metastatic melanoma is quite a different beast. But in those early days, there were no treatments for us. There was no up-to-date information, and there was really nothing you could find online. There just wasn't information. But since 2011 and 2012, we have literally become the driver of innovation in melanoma. And I can tell you, when we first started the foundation, there wasn't a lot of hope. By 2011, 2012, we were starting to get hope. And I can tell you, in 2021 and 2022, we're talking survivorship. It's become a whole different space. And we are now not only leading innovation in melanoma, but those treatments are now starting to move into other cancer indications. Next slide, please, Nat. But I do look good driving a bus. So now here's the slide from those early days. And I have to tell you, I absolutely love this slide, and I even blew it up so I could see it clearly. So if you look back in before 2012, we call those the melanoma dark days. We had dacarbazine, the IL-2, and we knew dacarbazine was not a drug that was used for melanoma. It was really more of a palliative treatment. But by 2012, we saw the first indication, the Yervoy, come in February of 2012. And at the same time, we saw the first targeted drug, Zelboraf, come into the space at the same time. So right out of the gate, we had 2 innovative medicines, one in targeted and one in IO. By 2013, we started to see the combinations of the targeted treatments. So Novartis came out with a TAF-MEK, and we started seeing that going to our patient database. Then by 2015, we saw 2 more modern immuno-oncologies. We saw the pembrolizumab come out, the nivolumab come out at around the same time. And at the same time, we saw another combination come into the target treatment. By 2016, now we were seeing more in the combination. And as you could see, then we had a huge combination come with the Nivo and the IPI in 2016. In 2018, we saw another drug come into the combo, into the adjuvant setting. So prior to 2018, if you were diagnosed, like Natalie, with stage 3 disease, you had to sit and wait and watch your disease grow to the metastatic setting before you could get any type of treatment. And for any of you on the line that have been in the stage 3 and had to wait for stage 4 drug, you know how incredibly difficult that is mentally, physically. You're literally sitting waiting for that cancer to grow to get a treatment. So then we had the targeted come into the adjuvant, then we had the Nivo come into the adjuvant setting, then we had the Pembro in 2019 come into the adjuvant setting. We really, at SaviorScan, we really started focusing when we first started on those metastatic and adjuvant settings because there weren't drugs or treatments for patients, and we knew we had to work diligently to try to get them into Canada. But then on top of that, we started hearing from patients with non-melanoma in basal cell and squamous cell in the advanced setting. And again, before 2019, there was nothing available to them. The patients that were coming to us, we were sending into the US for some type of clinical trial. But in 2019, we saw the first come into squamous cell carcinoma. We've just recently seen, or hoping to see, one come into basal cell carcinoma. Just this year, we have a new targeted combo that is sitting at Health Canada. We're hoping to see that move through the process soon. So as you can see, from 2012 to 2022, as Dr. Ralph Wong in Manitoba would say, we had a tsunami of medications coming into the melanoma space. Can you go to the next slide, Nat? So as you can imagine, that sent our healthcare providers into a little bit of a frenzy. As patient organizations, we were as well, because most of our oncologists at that time had been trained in chemotherapy. And again, these were all new and innovative, so side effects were different. For some patients, they were getting severe side effects. Some of the patients were still continuing to work, continuing to run their kids to school. Their quality of life was amazing. For others, it was not as easy. They were getting severe side effects. We helped form a melanoma task force of physicians across Canada early in 2012 because we were concerned that most of the doctors that were treating in those early days were either in Alberta or in Ontario, and we wanted to make sure that patients across this country were getting equal timely access to these drugs, that they were being treated at home, close to their family and support systems. So when the Melanoma Task Force of Oncologists started, there was probably 5 in 2012 from across Canada. The Canadian Melanoma Conference is happening actually tomorrow and the next day, and that Melanoma Task Force of Oncologists is probably 25 to 30 deep and goes literally from the Atlantics to the West Coast. Not only in big urban areas, but rural areas as well. What's really kind of neat for us to watch with our physicians is not only do we have that Canada-wide task force, but we've now got a task force within British Columbia and task force in Alberta. So, you know, if there's a patient file that comes to them to one of the rural areas where maybe the oncologist hasn't treated that much in the melanoma and in the innovative medicine, they will touch base with the mentor or the task force within that jurisdiction and province. And if they can't kind of sort out the file amongst themselves, then they will go to the greater task force of physicians across the country and get their questions answered. So it's been really amazing to watch the last 10 years how physicians have started mentoring each other, and all these task forces have been developed. So I don't want to go into the side effect profiles of the drugs. I'm not a doc, I'm just an advocate, but we have tons of information on our website, and all the webinars that we've done over the past with our physicians that can really walk you through those. So I would, ask you and suggest that you hop onto our website to look through some of those webinars. We do have a number of webinars happening, just so you know. In June, we've been asked to attend ASCO and set up an exhibit booth as a patient organization, which is huge kudos to Save Your Skin. But right after that, we will be doing a post-ASCO webinar, which will be bringing and updating all the new clinical trials that are coming and some of the data out of some of the trials that are running in Canada now. So stay tuned for that. Keep taking a look at a website and we'll make sure it's all updated for you. Next slide, Nat. So who's in your care team? I have to be honest, all of this was really important to me because I realized in my first days of my melanoma journey, I just was relying on the team at the Lionsgate Hospital. So the nurses that were hooking me up and the oncologist that was coming in to see how I was doing. In those early days, I'm sure you would all agree, your head is full, your mind is full, your heart is full, and you're trying to take in as much as you can, but it's not easy. But what I know now is the importance of that entire cancer care team, and I mean the entirety of it. And because each one of them will play an intricate role in your care. So firstly, we all know our general practitioner or our GP or family doctor. I know right now it's hard to get access to a GP in Canada, but we're working behind the scenes on that because they're an intricate part of your success and your cancer care team. We know the general practitioner that has an interest in oncology is called a GPO. We have a number of those actually across Canada, and they bring a very unique expertise with them. So they treat in GP, they treat in oncology. So they're really well diverse in treatment. Most of you will know, most of us have had a surgeon or a plastic surgeon involved in our team. A dermatologist will be important to our team even after treatment. There across Canada, there are a number of dermatologists. These are always mouthfuls. Again, they're very instrumental because they treat not only in dermatology, but they also treat in the oncology space. So they're very up to date on treatments coming in to not only the metastatic setting, but the adjuvant setting as well. We all know the importance of our medical oncologists, our surgical oncologists, our radiation oncologists, and the nurse navigator or the oncology nurse. And I have to tell you, figuring out which one of those is going to be your coach going through this process is really, really important. Every province is different. Every cancer center is different, but it's really important when you get in to meet whoever that first appointment is for you, whether it's the oncologist, which it was for me, or your GP or the dermatologist, that you're already asking them questions about who your cancer care team is. And then you're going to find out, or you're going to know very quickly within your own care who your go-to person will be. I have to tell you, after I was misdiagnosed, I changed GPs, and I actually interviewed a GP, and I said, here's what I need from you. I know where I'm getting my treatment, that my oncologist and the nursing oncologist have my back. They have somebody there that talks about my mental care, that talks about my nutrition, that walks me through the process while I'm getting my treatment. What I need is somebody that either has hospital privilege or that is able to read my scans, because sometimes, after, you all know this, you get scan anxiety after you get your scans, and sometimes we don't get those results as quick as we would hope to get them, or we think we need to get them. And I wanted to make sure that my GP had access to all my scan results so that I could quickly call her, get a visit with her, and maybe walk through my scans in a more timely fashion than I would have had I had to wait for my oncologist. And actually, through my process too, when my cancer came back in 2006 and I was rushed into emergency, my oncologist couldn't come into emergency to see me. I had to be wheeled into the oncology department, the treatment unit, and if I didn't have a GP that had hospital privileges, and I really did, because I wanted to make sure that everybody around me knew my process and knew of the treatments and knew the history of my disease. So again, those are really important. That cancer care team is unbelievably important. I was going to go through and explain what each one of those specialists do, but you can go back to our website and take a look at those, or I can answer those in the question period if you'd like. So Nat, can you flip to the next page, please? So I want to talk a little bit about patient advocacy, because in the beginning of my journey as a Canadian, I thought I was going to be diagnosed and there was going to be this miraculous group of people that were going to just pick me up under their wings and walk me through a process. You know, the only other experience I had had with our healthcare system was having my two sons, and that was an incredible process. As most of us know that have had children, there was a nurse at my side at all times. My babies were healthy, and I was out, and I had somebody come up, a public health nurse, come in for the first couple of weeks to check me and make sure all was good and that I was feeding my babies properly, and it was an A+ experience. Cancer space was a little bit different for me. I didn't have what I felt I would have got. I really was navigating myself through the system. I had to find my own treatments. Scans were lost. X-rays were lost. On the day that I had to go to see the lung specialist, because there was a point where they thought they were going to remove my lung, I had to run down to Lionsgate to get my chest X-ray. He wouldn't see me without it. It was 6 a.m. and we couldn't find it. And I didn't even realize that I could have asked for a copy of it. I just thought that everything would be held in some miraculous, you know, depository, and when I needed it would be moved for me. But again, I realized the stress that brought into my already stressful life was a reminder that advocating for yourself is incredibly important. And if you're not well enough to be advocating for yourself, you need to have somebody in your support system that can. And it's so important because there's two different journeys. There's the journey of the patient, there's the journey of that caregiver. And most of you know that have already had treatment. You've got just so much going on that it's really hard to keep up to pace with how was your treatment, you know, what were your side effects, have you eaten this week? You know, it's just so hard to put all that together, that the advocacy piece is incredibly big. And you need to start advocating even before you start moving into the process. Once I got into the process and started understanding the need to advocate, it was almost a little bit too late for me. I needed to know about advocating right from the beginning of the process, and how to get ready for appointments. Because as all of you know, when you go in to see that oncologist, you have a million questions and you got 15 minutes. So you better have everything in order, or you're going to go home and you're going to have those 95 questions that you didn't get to. So it's really important that before every visit, whether it's to the surgeon, to the derm, to the oncologist, that you are so prepared. And you know who in that care team is really your coach and your go-to person. And it might not even be somebody on there. It might be somebody in your support system. It might be somebody like Save Your Skin that can actually help you get ready and prepare for those appointments. Can I have the next slide now? So we developed lots of handouts for patients. Everything we develop at Save Your Skin either has come from a patient or patients that were looking for something. So we're always preparing handouts. We prepared one just recently on, you know, how to get ready and questions you might want to ask your doctor. On the other side of that prepared handout, We also, and we've got it actually as a handout on the webinar here. On the other side, it's some of the supports that we offer at Save Your Skin, so you can take a look at that. Most of us weren't even talking about virtual care before COVID. And as you know, some of you may know, when COVID hit, we started hearing from our patients that were getting mistreatments. They were not getting to surgeries. The whole system stopped. In March of 2019, a group of patient organizations from across Canada, we were all hearing and seeing the same thing. We jumped into action because we wanted to make sure our patients were not being left behind, because we know that COVID would eventually end, we hope, but the cancer care didn't. And so we jumped into gear, and the first thing we did was create a virtual care booklet. And we wanted to make sure that patients that were going to be having these virtual care appointments with their doctors were going to be prepared. And, you know, it's huge because a lot of patients in the skin cancer space are a little bit older, you know, they're not as tech savvy. So we wanted to make sure that we went out and did a survey and asked our patients, you know, what their concerns were during COVID. If they had concerns about virtual care, what did they like about it, what they didn't, and we went and built the virtual care booklet. So please take a look at that. Again, we get a lot of questions from patients. You know them, you know, they're asking, you know, what stage is our melanoma or non-melanoma? You know, what will treatment look like? You know, what about a biopsy? I hear a lot about patients that want to know, you know, how will treatment start? When will it start? What are the side effects? How do we manage those side effects? You know, how do my health conditions, you know, and concerns, how are they going to affect my treatment? Should I consider clinical trials? Am I eligible for clinical trials? And sort of what do I do next? You know, now that the targeted treatments have really come into our landscape, you know, we need patients to be understanding BRAF and NRAS mutations and asking questions around that. So when they're making decisions with their physicians, they're making informed decisions, and the physician has everything they need in that file to help you walk through your cancer care. Next slide, Nat. So about 6 years ago, I was asked to be part of an AllCAN group in Europe, and it was all European organizations. I was honored to be asked. And the whole premise of that was making sure that patients were at the center of everything that was being done in Europe for them, to make sure that nothing was done without the voice of the patient. And we worked for 2 years on this project, surveying patients and physicians and decision makers within the European system. And what we started working on at AllCAN International was the inefficiencies in the healthcare system in Europe and how we could get equal timely access to patients going through the process. 3 years ago, I was asked by physicians in Canada if AllCAN was something we would bring into the Canadian space. I said I would love to, but we have a very unique system in Canada, and I wasn't sure how we could do that. You know, we have a federal body, we have provincial territorial bodies, and then we have individual cancer centers in Canada. So I wasn't sure how we were going to link all of the process together. But I thought this is worth a try. I think we need to look at this. So we started going out and we interviewed patients, we interviewed physicians, we interviewed healthcare and decision makers, we interviewed partners. We wanted to make sure we had a multi-stakeholder approach to what, if there was something that we wanted to address in Canada, what was it and how would it best fit the needs of our patients? So I have to tell you, I absolutely love this diagram. When we went out and surveyed everybody, we asked patients in that early diagnosis period, you know, what was it like for them? And you can see through the comments that they were worried because there was delays in the process. They weren't sure how the process worked, who was going to be leading them through the process. And it was an incredibly, incredibly stressful time. Once we got that initial referral into the diagnosis journey and the system, things got a little bit easier, but they were still unsure of who was going to navigate them through that journey. And I love that we put the little, you know, happy, not so happy faces on this, because I think all of us can really equate to that. And as most of us and most patients said, once they got into that final diagnosis piece and they were moved into the process and they now knew who was sort of the center and the coach of their care, it got a little bit easier. And maybe not physically, because then the treatments were started and then we had side effects, etc., and x-rays and scans and all of that. But the mental health piece of the journey got a little bit easier there. So this was really a big process for us. We are now working in AllCAN Canada. We have decision makers, partners, and physicians and patients from across the country. We're not just doing it in the melanoma, non-melanoma space. We know that cancer is cancer. We were just unfortunate to be diagnosed with melanoma. We could have been diagnosed with any other cancer. And I think that any process and progress that we make in the melanoma space needs to be shared across the masses. And we did that earlier when I showed the diagram about the treatments that came in from 2010 to 2022. We knew that we were getting them first in melanoma. And we wanted to be able to share our best practices and our learnings as patients right across the spectrum of cancer, because we wanted to make sure when those drugs and these treatments started coming into lung and myeloma and lymphoma and all the other cancer indications, that we could help those patients and those patient organizations navigate through the process. I'll be honest, the new and innovative medicines aren't cheap. They're extremely expensive. We've got a very tough process in Canada. We all want to sustain the healthcare system we have. So it was really important for us to work as a multi-patient organization group to make sure that we were getting equal, timely, innovative medicines to our patients as quickly as we can. Next slide, please, Nat. So here's all the words we all know and we all feel and we all hear. Back about 4 years ago, we started hearing from our patients the mental stress of a cancer diagnosis. And I have felt that since I was diagnosed. I don't know if it ever really goes away. I'm still waiting for that day. So at Save Your Skin, we decided, let's go out, take the pulse of our patients, our melanoma, non-melanoma patients, and see when they're feeling this depression, anxiety, fear, is integrating through the care path. Is it at the beginning? Is it while they're on treatment? Is it after treatment? And as you can imagine, it's throughout the entire continuum of care. We understand that, we know that. We took the findings from the survey we did into our patients. We've turned it into a poster, and we were able to present at the CMC back in 2018, and it was a wonderful opportunity for us because we wanted to really talk to our oncologists about their words and in that initial diagnosis, and how their words are really instrumental in getting us through the process, not from that physical aspect, but from that mental anxiety piece. We all know that if we can stay less anxious, less depressed, less frustrated, that there's potential for better outcomes while we're going for the treatment. So we really wanted to let our treating oncologists in this space know that we really needed them to hear, you know, the mental anguish that we were feeling through, and how could they help us through the process. And I think one of the key takeaways from them was, but we aren't trained in, you know, in psychosocial skills. And I said, I understand that, but I think when you give that bundle of papers to that patient that's newly diagnosed, that some of us look at right away and some of us might not look at till later in our journey, that you talk about mental health and make sure that we're getting the counseling and the help we need, because it's a win-win for not only the patient, but for the physician and the treater. Can you go to the next slide now, please? So here's our crazy complicated system in Canada. It will remind you all of the snakes and ladders games that we used to play. I'll start at the top, and I don't want to take too much time on this because it'll just kind of blow you away a little bit. There are 4 major steps of government that review and make the funding decisions. So our regulatory is, of course, Health Canada. They take the drug first. And they look at for safety and efficacy. Once they've done their due diligence, it goes to a group called CADF. at which they go then and start checking through the review process. That's the one time in the process that patients actually in Canada get their voice heard. So for some of you who have followed Save Your Skin for a while, you'll see that we do a number of surveys. We compile all your information and data, or not data, but all the information that you sent us. We do not pretty it up. We do not change any of the wording. What you tell us goes right to the cat's body, and we hope that they incorporate, we're pretty sure they do, into the review process. So they take a look at it, they will come up with a review and an initial review, and then the file goes to PCPA, which is the negotiating body, where the provinces will start negotiating with the pharmaceutical company to get the price within line. That's probably the longest part of the process. Then once the negotiations are done, it comes back and then it goes out into the provincial bodies or then cancer centers. There are a couple of provinces in Canada that actually will go out and look for patient feedback again. BC is one of those provinces. So we get the opportunity to reach back out to our patients, get more input from them, and submit it back into the process. So you can see how long that process takes. I was just part of a project called Tomorrow Can't Wait with the Conference Board of Canada. And out of the 20 countries in the world, we were number 18 to get our drugs to patients. I think it was just over 900 days from beginning to patient access. So behind the scenes, there's a lot of work that gets done. I will let you know we work diligently in that space. We are part of roundtables at every part of the process, and you'll always hear from us because before we are part of that roundtable process, we will come to you, the patient of today, to see what your needs are, what is missing, what the gaps are, and we will absolutely bring your patient voice to the powers that be across this country. So I don't want to take too much longer. I laugh. I told Natalie I didn't think I'd have an hour's worth of talking. Quite clearly, they know me better than I do because they giggled when I said that. Nat, if we can go to the next page. You can see that girl's eye rolling. I love this slide because when you see that, how the drugs get through the process, I'm sure you're all rolling your eyes. But it is a process, and I just want everybody on the call to know that you are part of that process. We make sure that your voice is heard at every table across the process of the treatments coming to you. So thank you for listening, and Nat, I'm going to hand it back to you.
Thanks, Kath. I'm overwhelmed with all the information. Thank you so much for giving us that, because it's every time I hear it, I learn something new every time. So thank you very much. I was going to say, I'm lucky enough to be able to have fireside chats with Kathy every day. And we both do that with many patients and caregivers that contact us for help. But today we wanted to share with you a bit of what that looks like and what kinds of questions a patient or caregiver may encounter along the way through cancer. Kath has covered many of these in her presentation just now. And I wouldn't blame you if you had to rewatch. And as Marianne mentioned, it will be recorded. But I have some more questions, of course. At this time as well, if anyone has any they would like to type in the questions panel, go for it, and we will try to answer them. I know we're getting close to time, but we might go over just a little bit. Again, if the recording will be available. So if we're not able to get to your question, we will answer by email regardless. But first question for you, if we could just go to the next slide, please. Because it's, it is winter, we're in the Northern Hemisphere, and we really should have a fireside chat. Well, we're in the Northern Hemisphere where it's cold, like myself in Northern British Columbia, unlike everyone on this call. Anyway, Kath, you talked about the medical team and the cancer care team. And of course, there is more information on our website as to what each person in that team does, but you just kind of reminded me that I will have to make sure that we put even more information on there about that. I know you have a great history of being a baseball coach. And I think of that often when people ask us or me or you, and we talk about these things. Can you help us understand who who should be the coach of our cancer care team? And also, as a newly diagnosed patient, how do you know who that person should be? Being as I started my cancer journey in Ontario, and now I live in British Columbia, I've noticed, it's very clear, I have a different care pathway. There's different people in charge of my care than there were in Ontario. So I know it's different across the country. But in general, this is a huge question, but can you answer, why is that? Who should be our coach? What should people expect when they're diagnosed with skin cancer in Canada? And who should they ask for? I feel that the medical oncologist is usually the one that would be in charge of someone with metastatic melanoma or non-melanoma skin cancer, which would be stage 3, stage 4, either to lymph nodes or to organs. But can you tell us a little bit of what you think about that? Who's the coach, or who should be?
Well, I think you find that out early in, I think it's important you find that out early in the whole continuum of care, right? And it can be different for everybody. I need everybody to know that, right? Because everybody looks for something different in an oncologist. So, I wanted the oncologist that scooched me out, didn't tell me what stage I was at. I didn't want to know. I didn't want to know how long I had to live. That was me personally. He scooched me out. So to me, it's everybody has a different role, but I can't stress enough how important that entire team is within your care. And who better to advocate for your health than you? I mean, we should be doing that anyway. I know it's a little harder in the cancer space because it's a cancer diagnosis and it kind of knocks us all back a little bit. But I would say, ask questions of every one of those players that you're going to see. If you see your GP first, if they're the one that diagnoses you, get prepared, have questions for them. Right. And not only are you getting information for you, I have to tell you, sometimes I found that I was actually educating physicians. My GP didn't know anything about melanoma. Well, she certainly did, 3 months in after when I kept going back to see her, because I was really educating her on that the process and the treatment. So I think it's something when every one of those, whichever one of those comes through your care, you need to ask them questions. Are you my coach? Who is the center? Who's gathering my information? Can I gather my own information? I know as Canadians, it's hard for us to do that. We have this incredible faith in our physicians, but as you know, Nat, most of the physicians always say to us, honestly, we know when our patients have talked to Save Your Skin because they've come absolutely armed with the questions they need to ask. And it's good for them, and it's really good for us, because then we're staying on time with our patients when they're coming in to see us, and we're getting them the real information that they need, right? And we're answering the questions that they need. So again, I'd like to say it would be nice if it was just one coach, like in a sport. But I think it really speaks to the importance of a patient advocacy group. I really do. I mean, we all know we can get online, and when I was diagnosed, there was nothing, and now there's everything, and not everything is good, and not everything is up to date, and not everything is right for you. So you need to know and find out what is right and good for you.
Yeah, no, well said. That's true, and it is different for everyone. I'm thinking of a friend who was with a surgeon who wasn't a surgical oncologist. It was a totally different, just a general, not just, but it was a different kind of surgeon. And my friend didn't know that he should be with someone who's going to look at a systemic treatment. So I think what you're saying too is that sometimes we don't know what questions to ask. And so my daughter actually taught me a long time ago to always ask the most important question. How do you know what that is? How do you know what that is? You might not know, but to ask as many questions as possible. The list that we've made in the handout that is attached here will be helpful. But you're right, Kath, you need to ask everyone that touches your file when you come into their office. Who are you? What do you do? And who am I seeing next? And if I'm not seeing someone next, why not? And when is it going to be that I do see someone next? Yeah. So thank you.
Yeah, and I will say too, though, that's why it's so important to get prepared for those. We talk about virtual care and being prepared for those new virtual care meetings, but it's the same no matter who you're going to see, right? You only have like 15 minutes with
Yeah,
an oncologist,
that's
even a
true.
GP.
Hard.
Yeah, it's hard. And I know for me, I had more questions when I came out than I did have when I went in. So it's
That's
super, super important that you not only be prepared, but then again, you find out who is that coach, who's instrumental, that when you leave that oncology appointment and your head is kind of turning 360, you have the ability to get a virtual care appointment with that GP or that derm or whoever, and get them to sort of kind of clarify as best they can.
No, exactly. Exactly. Okay, well, switching gears a little bit, I have another question for you. You also touched on this earlier, but gene testing. So when someone is newly diagnosed with melanoma, their physician, whether it's the GP or the medical oncologist or whoever is touching their, whoever's handling the coach of their cancer care team, may or may not let them know, or a patient may not know to ask. But should there be any specific testing that a melanoma patient, I mean, this could also apply for non-melanoma skin cancers, I'm sure, down the road, but in melanoma specifically, you said BRAF earlier. Can you tell us a little bit about BRAF and NRAS testing, gene testing?
Well, I think that's one of the most, that's on our top 3 questions to ask when you have that oncology visit, right, with your dog. Most of you know that 50% of melanoma is BRAF mutated. Which means that that's when you get access to not only IO, but then you have options of the targeted treatment. In the beginning days, there was only one lab in Canada that was testing for BRAF mutation back in 2011 and 12, and that was in Calgary. Now we have labs testing for that. We hope, because we always say to patients, you want to get, your oncologist should have the results from that BRAF testing before your original consult with them, because then you're actually, the doctor has everything they need in your file, right? They've got your surgical results, they've got your scans, they've got your test results from the mutation, and then the conversation about what type of treatment you should be having can happen. So it's really, I think it's really important. I know in some provinces we see those BRAF tests come back in days, in some provinces not days. We work behind the scenes to see what we can do to get those results quicker. We like to see them, and we should be seeing them before that that visit with the oncologist, so that informed decisions and treatment decisions can be made. It's really important.
True. And as you mentioned earlier, we're not getting too much into the science behind what the treatments do and how they work in this particular webinar, but we have lots of information on our website. But the BRAF testing specifically is, if you're positive or negative, isn't a bad or a good thing for your melanoma. It's just, it determines whether or not you can have one therapy in addition to another. Targeted therapy can be given to people who are BRAF positive, and for people who are BRAF wild type, they wouldn't be eligible for targeted therapy. That's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just treatment options that you'd be able to discuss with your doctor. So you want to know your BRAF status. And it's called BRAF, capital B as in brother, RAF, because I know sometimes that can be a little weird to understand, but again, it'll be in the handout. Thanks, Kath. A question that has come in on our panel as well. Okay, so how easy is it to get your medical information for your own records? I can take this one at first, Kath, and then hand it over to you if you don't mind. Where my treatment center was in Toronto, I was spoiled and lucky, and they had an online system where they put everything in that I could go retrieve as a PDF, and I could read it all the time. I can still access it now 8 years later. And I had my surgical reports, my pathology reports. Every time I went into one of the clinics and saw one of my physicians, whether it was the radiation oncologist, the surgical oncologist, or the medical oncologist, even the dermatologist, the whole system was connected, and I could go in and see that in the online system. And lots of centers have that across Canada. Lots of centers also don't. So now my cancer care center here in Northern British Columbia is a little different. I can still get my records, but I have to, first I asked my doctor, how do I get it? quite often they are sent to your GP. So you can start with your GP, you probably see them the most. But if they can't get it, then you can ask at your cancer center or your oncologist or your nurse, oncology nurse. And for me, I know I have to go physically into the BC Cancer Agency and request my paper copy, which is fine. I don't mind. I'll go in every time and do it, and I won't complain about it. But Cass, do you have any other information about how people can get their medical records for their own use? I'm thinking of Zamplo as well, actually, but
I think that's question number 2. now that I've looked at our question handout, I think we can go back in and sort of split some order. I think that's the first question you want to ask. Where do I get access? Can I have access? And that's really another important question, right? You want access to, or do you want access to your records? That's again another individual thing, right?
That's true too. That's true too. Very good point, because those records can be helpful in in the moment or in the future. So you never know.
And they can be scary in the moment sometimes too. So, I think that goes back to, if you are going to have access to those, you want to make sure, going right back to who's the coach and who's that focal point in your care, that if something comes up on there, like it did to me in a cab when I all of a sudden saw tumors everywhere, that I have somebody that within my cancer care that I can call and help, kind of wander or go through those results with me.
Yeah, that's true. No, very good. Very good. I'm sorry, I know we're going to go over a little bit on time, but we'll keep the recording going. If anybody has to leave, we will still get going, but we have more questions coming in as well. Something that that a few people have asked is how, this is a difficult one to ask. How do you know, or how do you make sure that your doctor actually does have your back, whether it's your oncologist or your GP? How do you know that you have the right healthcare provider? Do you have the right to a second opinion?
Yes, and I know that's really hard for us. I know it is, because we're Canadian and we're thrilled that we have the healthcare system we have, and we're Canadian. But yes, you can ask for a second opinion. And I would hope that, if there's something that's concerning you or worrying you about one of those people on your team, that you go back to your coach and you can walk through that process with them. Maybe it's just, I don't know, maybe it's just the way they put their white coat on that day. I don't know. Maybe it's the way you were feeling that day, right? There can be a lot of things within the process. So, but we are entitled to a second opinion. I know our doctors, Nat, you and I know that we work with, have told us in the past that yes, you are entitled to that second opinion. And we just hope that our doctors, respect our need for that.
No, that's true. And if you feel that they're not doing that, I'm sure it's a rare case, because we have wonderful healthcare providers in Canada, and I, as a patient, am very grateful for them. But there can be situations that just don't quite work for the patient. So does a patient have the right to get, like I mentioned, a second opinion and or a new physician? Again, I know there are a lot of rural areas in our country where we might not exactly have access, and we may feel we can't be choosy. And you're right, we're nice, we're Canadian, but at the end of the day, we need to get the care that we need. So can we go after that and get a different physician if we need one?
Yes, we're entitled to that. You can tell I'm kind of walking on eggshells here, because I know that the treaters in melanoma across this country are amazing. So, and you know this, Nat, generally when patients, we have a 1-800 line at Save Your Skin that's, on all day, all night. I answer it as soon as I get a call. And generally the first question I will ask those patients is, who is your oncologist? Where have you been referred to? In the beginning days, I worried a little bit because, there were, as I said, maybe 5 really melanoma, experts in Canada. But now that's changed. So from the oncology's perspective, there's very few times where a patient has wanted a second opinion. But again, I mean, we're entitled to ask. I know it's scary though, because you know that they all work closely together, right? So I know it's a really hard question to answer, but you need to be comfortable. You need to be comfortable with your caregiver or
That's
with
right.
your healthcare professional. You need to be comfortable. It's really important. They're going to be a big part of your life for, you know, what might be a short amount of time, a long amount of time. So you need to be confident there. So if you're not, you need to find the place where you are.
No, very true. That's exactly true. Shifting gears again, I have a bunch of questions coming in about clinical trials. So clinical trials in Canada can quite often be, you know, and especially in past, in that timeline you showed us, can be the only way that a patient would be able to receive a treatment, less and less. But clinical trials in general, a lot of people don't know about them. They don't. Should patients consider them? Are they a good thing? Do we, you know, can we rely on them? Is it, what can you tell us about clinical trials?
Well, I think they're great because I wouldn't even be on this call if it wasn't for all the clinical trials I had.
Me too.
So yeah, so I would go there. There is a website, clinicaltrials.gov. You can find that on our website. And that will tell you where all the clinical trials are actually across the globe, but you can narrow it down to Canada. But I always think that's another one of those top 5 questions that you're asking your oncologist when you go in, right? What's the treatment protocol? Are there clinical trials available? Am I eligible for them? I think those are all really good points that you're discussing in that initial consult, right? You just don't want to go in and say, well, I'd like this treatment and leave. I think you need to have that really robust discussion with those oncologists, right? What do you see as my treatment plan? You know, what options will I have? What if that treatment doesn't work and it comes back? Do I have another option? Should I start with a clinical trial? Which treatment should I start with if I'm BRAF positive? Those are big discussions in that first 15-minute consult.
That's absolutely true. You're right. You're right. Another question I wanted to ask you is, of course, it just slipped my mind.
How about if I talk a little bit about, because I know people probably want to go, but I want to go back and talk about the way the drugs are approved in Canada and the importance of the voice of the patient.
Sure. Then X-rays and imaging. Thank you. Then don't let me forget.
Yeah. So we are one of the very few countries in the world where patients' voices is heard in the process. So to me, it's really important that when we at Save Your Skin, I can tell you we do a lot of health policy and government relations work behind the scenes. And I told you earlier, there really isn't a table that we aren't part of. We were instrumental in making sure the COVID vaccine went to our immune compromised patients very quickly across the country. We worked together to make sure the patient's voice and the physician's voice was heard on that issue. But at Save Your Skin, for myself, I get to do the policy work. I get to meet with the decision makers right across the country, either the health minister or the deputy health ministers. I try to get in to see them at least once a year to kind of give them an update on what's coming into the melanoma space, some of the needs of the patients in their provinces. The physicians in Canada know very well when they see a problem, either in access or clinical trial or any part of the process actually, that they can call us and that we have kind of a direct line back to those decision makers where we can generally get a call to meet with them. And I have to tell you, we have had success on a number of files behind the scenes. We're working diligently right now in the ocular melanoma space. Those patients are where we were in the metastatic space back in 2006, 7, and 8. They have limited treatments. They're both in clinical trials, one in Ontario, one in Alberta. We need to get all our patients to those trials. So again, when you see Save Your Skin coming out with a survey, I know you've got lots of things going on in your life, but your voice is absolutely heard. Yeah, I mean, nobody else in the world gets access to that. So that health policy and GR work is big for us behind the scenes.
Very true. Very true. Okay, one more question and then I promise I'll stop. What can people expect? And I know that we do not give medical advice per se, and so every patient or caregiver should ask the healthcare provider that they're working with, but imaging and surveillance, so CAT scans, MRIs, PET scans. I also know that it's different, across the country. It can be different in every province, but is there anything that you can recommend that people or suggest that people should ask for or expect to have as far as a surveillance or being followed after a stage 3 or 4 diagnosis of melanoma or non-melanoma skin cancer, or even stage 2?
Can you hear me?
Nope, there you are. Did you hear me?
Yeah, I guess the universe is trying to get us to stop talking. So I didn't hear a word you said.
Oh, okay. I was asking about imaging and surveillance after diagnosis. So knowing that we don't give medical advice, and every patient and caregiver should ask their caregiver or their care provider, but what can a patient expect if they are diagnosed with a stage 3 or 4 melanoma or non-melanoma skin cancer, or even a stage 2? PET scans, MRIs, CT scans, the protocols are different across the country. What do you recommend? We have the right to ask for whatever we want, I believe, but if you have any comment on that.
No, we do have a right. When and what I loved about my oncologist, and I guess because I was one of the very few surviving melanoma patients, he asked me what I would like, what would make me comfortable. It's even as a survivor, I mean, I'm still scanned regularly every year. I remember when they wanted to graduate me from the 3-month to the 6-month, I have to tell you, I cheated the system. I would go and have my scans done in BC, and then I'd fly into Edmonton 3 months later. I was so scared of not being under the care of my treaters. I was just so scared. And even when I went from 6-month graduation to a year graduation, there's a lot of nervousness around there. So, a lot of treaters, you can ask them, after treatment, can I stay on the 3-month protocol? And if they say no, just ask why. Right? If it's 6 months, why? And just recently, my oncologist phoned me. He calls me Her Highness and said, "Where are you? I haven't seen you." And I said, "Well, I've been coming for a year for the last 8. Can I now be graduated till, to maybe a 5-year? And he's like, "No, we will see you regularly." So my scans are part of my life. I have my blood work, my CT. I go in and get my results and hopefully get on my merry way. So I think it's just another thing you can ask. And if they say no, ask why. Right? It's your health.
Yeah,
it's your care, and it's your right to advocate for you.
that's right. No, that's very well said. And I was the same. I was afraid to go make that transition, but my treater said I could ask for anything that I wanted. So I still go with that, even though I have a new treater now, and we'll see how that goes, but I'll definitely keep you posted. Well, thank you. I think we have tons more questions, so we'll be busy emailing people responses, but I think we've covered a lot of information here, so we'll go from that. I'm going to hand the screen back over to Marianne, I believe, at this point. Thanks, Kath.
Hi. Well, thank you so much, Kathy, for sharing your insights with us, and Natalie for facilitating such an interesting discussion. I'm sure that the patients and caregivers who are here with us today will agree that you've done a wonderful job of unpacking the really difficult process that can be the treatment journey for new patients. So to all of you who joined us today, a big thank you for attending this session. Again, I'll mention that the session is recorded and will be available for viewing on the Save Your Skin Foundation website and on our YouTube channel. If there are additional questions that we haven't answered today, please send them to myself at info@saveyourskin.ca. And as Kathy mentioned, we've created a handout with some questions to ask your doctor and support resources for patients. And you can find this handout by clicking on the handout heading on the GoToWebinar control panel, and you can also download it from our website at newlydiagnosed.saveyourskin.ca. All right, thank you so much for watching and have a good night.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Thanks.